Washington, D.C., an early autumn Saturday morning. Sunlight filtered through the oak canopies, scattering small golden specks across the street. The air was cool, the sky blue, and the city seemed to slow down after a week full of political noise. In that moment, Amara Lewis felt like she could finally breathe. She had left her government vehicle back at Blair House. No driver, no security detail, no radio at her side. Today, Amara wanted to be just an ordinary woman. Not the White House Director of Security, not the Iron Lady who had faced down dozens of terrorist threats. Just Amara, 40 years old, brown-skinned, curly-haired, eyes tired yet bright. She walked along 7th Street, where small cafes nestled between old buildings. Her usual spot, Bean Republic, was as crowded as ever. The smell of roasted coffee mingled with warm waffle batter. The barista recognized her and smiled. "Black coffee on ice, as always, Ms. Lewis?" She nodded, replying softly, "Yeah, but add a little milk today. It's the weekend." At a small outdoor table, with a steaming cup and her phone switched off, Amara sat silently watching people pass by. Sometimes she forgot how far she'd come. From a poor girl in South Chicago to the highest position in national security. Yet it was streets like these that made her feel closest to real life. She smiled faintly. Strange, she thought. I protect the president every day, yet I can't even protect my own peace. A group of young men passed by, laughing loudly. Across the street, 2 patrol officers were talking near a car parked illegally. It was an ordinary scene, except one of the officers' eyes lingered on her for too long. He, Sergeant Reynolds, about 35, with a rigid face behind dark glasses, glanced at her, then exchanged a few words with his partner. Both crossed the street. Amara stayed seated, unconcerned, until the blue uniforms stopped right beside her table. "Excuse me, ma'am. We received a report of a suspicious individual in the area. May I see your ID?" Reynolds's tone carried no respect. It was the kind of voice Amara had heard too often, dry, cold, full of prejudice. She looked out calm. "Suspicious? I'm just having coffee, officer." "Yes, but what are you doing here? Do you live around this area?" "There's no need to answer that, is there? I haven't broken any laws." Reynolds smirked slightly, glancing at his partner. "We're just doing our job, ma'am. ID, please." Amara sighed, reaching into her jeans pocket for her wallet. But as she stood up, Reynolds immediately blocked her movement. "Hold it. Keep your hands where I can see them." A few bystanders began to stare. The gentle morning sunlight suddenly felt harsh. Amara looked him straight in the eye. "Officer, I'm a lawful citizen. There's no reason for you to treat me like a criminal. I'll show you my ID, but please lower your voice." Reynolds barked back. "I said, hands up." His voice drew even more attention. Someone raised their phone to record. Amara felt the tension tighten like a wire. She knew one wrong move could send everything spiraling out of control. "Don't, not here, not like this," she told herself. But at that moment, her phone buzzed in her pocket, just a faint vibration, but enough to startle Reynolds. In an instant, he grabbed her arm, spun her around, and pushed her against the table. "Stay still. Hands behind your back." The cup shattered on the pavement. The cafe went silent. A waitress screamed, "Hey, what are you doing?" Amara tried to stay composed. "Calm down, officer. I'll show you my ID. Her words were cut off by the cold click of handcuffs. Phones were raised in every direction. Reynolds' voice lowered but stayed sharp. "You have the right to remain silent until your lawyer is present." Moments later, from the wallet that had fallen to the ground, a glint of metal caught the light, a special federal ID badge embossed with the seal. Executive Office of the President, Director of Security. Reynolds' younger partner, Officer Jenkins, picked it up. When he saw the emblem, he froze. "Sergeant, you might want to look at this." Reynolds frowned, snatching it from him. His expression shifted from confusion to horror. He stepped back, his voice cracking. "Oh my God." Amara turned around, the cuffs still on, her face unervingly calm. She looked straight at Reynolds and spoke softly, yet clearly. "You just handcuffed the director of White House security." A deathly silence followed. Then murmurs erupted around them like ripples. Jenkins stammered. "We were so sorry, ma'am. It was just—" "Save your apology." Amara cut him off. "You'll need it when you speak to my lawyer." She turned, scanning the crowd. Phones were still recording. A young woman, trembling, asked, Are you real? The actual White House director?" Amara nodded faintly, her tone weary. "Sometimes people only believe when there's a video." By noon, the 2-minute clip spread across social media. The first title read, "Police arrest Black woman without cause." But within hours, once her identity was confirmed, national media exploded. White House security director detained by police over suspicion. Uncontrolled incident in D.C. A story of power, bias, and dignity. The D.C. Police Department held an emergency meeting that night. Their preliminary report called it an operational mistake. But the public didn't buy it. Hashtags #Justice for Amara and #7th Street flooded every platform. Another video, showing Amara's calm but pained face in handcuffs, went viral across the country. Inside the White House, phones rang nonstop. The press secretary paced restlessly in the briefing room. The president, only a year into his term, called Amara directly. "Amara, I just saw the video. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sir, but I'm afraid the country isn't." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. Maybe start by reminding people that justice has no color." That night, Amara sat alone in her small apartment. The lights were off. Only the TV screen glowed, replaying the day's news. Every channel, every commentator was talking about the same thing. Millions watched. Thousands argued, some defending the police, others outraged for her. Amara turned the TV off. She looked out the window. Outside, 7th Street still glowed quietly, peaceful as if nothing had happened. She recalled Reynolds' eyes when he realized who she was. Not just fear, but confusion. Maybe even shame. Maybe he didn't understand why he acted that way. Or worse, he did, but had long stopped questioning it. Maybe I'm to blame too, she thought. For years she had guarded national security, yet forgotten the smallest kind. The safety of a Black woman walking down the street. Outside, the autumn wind kept blowing. A light rain began to patter against the window. Amara closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Tomorrow, nothing will ever be the same again." The next morning, when Amara opened her eyes, her phone was already vibrating nonstop. Over 100 unread messages. 50 missed calls. A day ago, she had been just a woman sipping coffee on 7th Street. Today, she was the center of attention in all of America. On television, the news channels kept replaying that 2-minute video. Every slow-motion frame of Reynolds pushing her, every comment, every hashtag, all tangled between outrage and justification. This is living proof of discrimination within the system. The police were just doing their job. Don't politicize everything. If she were white, would he have done the same? Amara sat silently. She had witnessed hundreds of similar incidents throughout her years working at the White House. But she had never thought she would be the one in that clip. The door swung open. Rachel, her close assistant, entered with a tense face. "Boss, emergency meeting at 9 a.m. in the Situation Room. The president wants you there." Amara glanced at the clock. 8:15. "All right. Prepare the files related to the post-incident protocol." "And?" "Rachel, yes. If anyone asks, tell them I'm fine. Don't let them see I'm angry." Rachel nodded slightly, knowing that wasn't just an instruction. It was armor Amara was putting on. The White House basement meeting room, usually reserved for discussions of war, terrorism, or national crisis, was packed today because of a viral video. The Attorney General, National Security Advisor, FBI Director, and even the press secretary were all present. The president sat at the head of the table, fingers interlaced, eyes heavy. "Amara," he said, "the entire country is talking about you. I need to know exactly what happened." Amara took a deep breath and recounted briefly, clearly, with no embellishment, no concealment. When she reached the part where she was handcuffed, the room fell silent. After a moment, the Attorney General spoke. "We'll have to open an internal investigation, but public opinion won't wait. I'm afraid the press will want to know the White House's stance." The press secretary interjected. I've already received over 30 interview requests. CNN, NBC, Fox News, everyone wants to hear from her. Amara looked up. I won't speak. At least not now. I don't want to become a symbol or a victim. This is bigger than me. The president nodded slightly, eyes filled with both admiration and concern. You have the right to remain silent, Amara. But remember, silence can also be a message. That afternoon, the video reached over 50 million views online. A spontaneous protest broke out right in D.C., in front of police headquarters. Placards were raised high. No justice, no peace. Voices echoed through the cold autumn air. 7th Street will not be forgotten. Meanwhile, the city's police chief, Mr. Hayes, held a press conference. He tried to keep his voice steady. What happened was unfortunate. We're reviewing operational procedures and will take appropriate action regarding the individuals involved. A reporter shouted, You call attacking the White House security director just an unfortunate incident? Hayes replied curtly, Everyone is equal before the law. That sentence was instantly dissected, circulated, and became the second explosion. That same evening, in her apartment, Amara watched the news again. Her handcuffed image now appeared in every frame, every angle. Each replay felt like a blade slicing her pride. The pride of a woman who had dedicated her life to protecting the very institution that failed her. The phone rang. It was Maya Lewis, her mother, calling from Chicago. Her voice trembled. My daughter, I saw the news. What did they do to you, Amara? It's okay, Mom. I'm fine. Fine. They treated you like a criminal. I raised you not to bow your head, but this time, you have to make them remember who you are. Amara was silent. Her mother's voice carried the pain of generations judged by skin color. I don't need to prove who I am, Mom. They need to prove they still know shame. By the third day, things were spiraling out of control. A group of senators demanded the Justice Department open a full investigation. The media ran red banners. Police or enemies of the people, when protectors become attackers. Nighttime talk shows brought in experts, each with their own take. This is America's wake-up call. We shouldn't politicize a personal incident. Amara Lewis is the face of a new America, strong, but not allowed to be wrong. In the dark, Amara watched those faces debate her as if she were a case study. She recalled her days in Afghanistan, when she'd been a frontline security agent. She'd faced gunfire, risked her life to save teammates. Yet here at home, because of a civilian outfit, she was seen as a suspicious person. A memory flashed, her old instructor's voice. The most dangerous enemy isn't the one with a gun, but the prejudice in someone's mind. 3 days later, Reynolds, the officer who assaulted her, was suspended. But instead of calming the public, the move fueled the outrage. Another clip surfaced showing Reynolds had previously been reported for violence against black citizens, but never disciplined. The media called it a systemic silence chain. Civil rights organizations began demanding full transparency of the D.C. Police Department's records. Amara received hundreds of interview invitations, thousands of messages of support, and anonymous threats as well. Some called her a hero, others a political spark. But Amara wanted only silence. She wasn't ready to turn her humiliation into a slogan. Until the president called again. Amara, you can't hide forever. The whole country is watching us. You can turn this into a real chance for change. You want me to go on television? I want you to tell the truth, not anger. People need to see that justice has a face, a voice, and a heart. She thought for a moment, then nodded. All right, but I won't play the victim. 3 days later, Amara appeared live on 60 Minutes. She wore a white blouse, minimal makeup, hair neatly tied back. The host asked, Director Lewis, how did it feel to be treated that way by the very force you've worked with? She looked straight into the camera, her voice low but firm. Painful, not because they didn't know who I was, but because they didn't care what kind of person I am. The studio went silent. She continued, I've worked over 20 years in security. I understand mistakes happen. But this wasn't a mistake. It was reflex. A reflex so deeply rooted in the system that it acts before the mind can think. The host paused for a few seconds. Do you want them punished? I want them to learn something. If we only punish, nothing changes. The interview aired on Sunday night, drawing tens of millions of viewers. People admired her composure and humanity. Shares of companies producing police body cameras soared. Everyone wanted transparency. But behind the scenes, those within the system grew uneasy. A senior advisor whispered to the president, "If you let her keep talking, more will come out. More than we can handle." The president replied quietly, "She speaks for our conscience. Don't touch her." Late that night, when Amara returned home, reporters were already waiting outside. Flashes went off, questions fired rapidly. "What do you think about becoming a symbol of justice? Rumor says you'll run for Congress. Is that true? Are you afraid of retaliation?" Amara walked past them without a word. But as she turned the corner, she saw a young black girl, about 10 years old, standing with her mother. The girl held a handwritten sign. "Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Because of you, I believe I can be safe when I grow up." Amara stopped, bent down, and smiled. "You have to believe that, sweetheart, and help others believe it too." The girl nodded eagerly, eyes shining. Amara turned away, walking slowly under the streetlights. Inside, she knew, the storm had only begun. Because behind this story were powers trembling not out of fear that she was a victim, but because she had the right to speak the truth. The whole of America seemed to erupt that morning. From television news to social media, everywhere the same video spread. A white police officer attacking a black woman in the middle of the street. But what shocked the entire world was the woman's true identity. Amara Lewis, the White House Director of Security. No one could believe it. The woman pinned to the ground, her collar yanked, her mouth struggling to shout, "I didn't do anything wrong," was in fact the head of the force that protected the president, the one who commanded Secret Service units and ensured the safety of the most powerful people in the United States. That morning, the headquarters of the Central Washington, D.C. Police Department sank into chaos. Reporters, cameras, and protesters crowded outside. Every gaze was fixed on the name, now disgraced in the media. Officer Bradley Cooper, the cop who had struck and humiliated Amara. Bradley sat in the interrogation room, hands clasped tightly, sweat trickling down his forehead. He looked exhausted, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. In front of him stood Captain Simmons, his superior, watching him with a mix of disappointment and anger. "Do you have any idea what you've just done, Cooper?" Simmons barked. Bradley swallowed hard, speaking softly. I was just following procedures, sir." She refused to show ID and had an attitude. "Attitude?" Simmons slammed his hand on the table, voice hard as steel. "You just tackled and handcuffed the director of White House security in broad daylight." Bradley froze, disbelief spreading across his face. "What? Who did you say?" "Amara Lewis," Simmons said slowly. "The woman you called a resisting suspect, that's her." The air in the room turned to ice. Bradley went numb. He had heard the name before. Amara Lewis, the first black woman in U.S. history to serve as director of White House security. Known for her discipline, intelligence, and unshakable resolve. "Oh God," Bradley whispered, his voice cracking. "I didn't know. I really didn't know she was." "Not knowing doesn't give you the right to humiliate someone," Simmons said, his tone low and heavy. "You've just turned this entire department into a national disgrace." Bradley lowered his head. There were no words left to defend himself. Meanwhile, inside the White House, the third-floor security meeting room was silent. Pale light reflected off Amara's calm face. Though she had been advised to take time off after the incident, she came to work as usual. No anger, no tears, only a cold, steady determination in her eyes. President Marshall sat across from her, his expression full of regret. "Amara, I'm truly sorry. What happened to you is unacceptable." "I know, sir," Amara replied quietly, "but I don't want this to turn into personal revenge. I want the truth to come out." "You mean an internal investigation?" the National Security Advisor asked. "No," Amara said firmly. "I want the Justice Department involved. I want transparency, so no one can say I'm using my position for advantage." President Marshall studied her for a long moment. He knew the woman sitting before him wasn't just speaking for herself, but for millions who had been judged by the color of their skin. Amara, he said slowly, you know how explosive this will be, don't you? Yes. Amara smiled faintly, her gaze unwavering. But the explosion is necessary. Not just for me, for those who will be treated unjustly after me. At that very moment, major news networks interrupted regular programming for a special broadcast. The video was replayed again and again, analyzed frame by frame. Social media flooded with hashtags. Hashtag Justice for Amara. Hashtag End Police Brutality. Hashtag We Stand with Amara. Human rights activists took to the streets. Many wept as they watched. A black woman beaten by the very system she paid taxes to protect. In his small apartment, Bradley sat motionless before the TV. His face appeared on every news channel, spliced between shots of Amara pinned to the pavement. He listened to the scathing commentary, the condemnations pouring in from strangers. This cop is the symbol of systemic racism. If she weren't the director of security, would anyone even know? Justice can't depend on the color of power. Bradley turned off the TV and walked to the window. Outside, the pale yellow streetlights cast a tired glow on his face. Pale, weary, lost. He knew things had gone far beyond his control. 3 days later, the Justice Department launched a formal investigation. Amara was summoned to give her statement. She arrived on time, composed, dressed in a simple black suit. No entourage, no guards. She recounted everything calmly. How her car had been stopped, how Bradley ordered her out without reason, how he pushed her down when she tried to explain. I'm on my way to the White House. A female investigator asked, did you ever think that if you had resisted more strongly, things could have ended worse? Amara smiled faintly, her eyes tinged with sadness. I know, because I've seen it happen to others. And if I had resisted, maybe I wouldn't be here today to tell this story. The room fell silent. Everyone felt the weight of her words, words born from real experience, real pain. Meanwhile, Bradley was called in with his lawyer. He entered the disciplinary board's chamber stripped of his badge and weapon, just a man trembling under the weight of judgment. Officer Cooper, do you have anything to say? One member asked. Bradley drew a deep breath and said, I'm sorry. I didn't know who she was. I never meant to insult or use force. I just acted on instinct, interrupted an elderly woman with silver hair. Do you realize that this so-called instinct of yours is the very problem? You saw a black woman as a threat simply because she wasn't like you. Bradley lowered his head, unable to speak. That evening, Amara returned to her apartment. She turned off all the lights, leaving only the glow of her laptop. Her inbox overflowed, hundreds of emails from messages of support to heartfelt thanks from strangers. One message made her pause. I'm the mother of a 14-year-old black boy. Thank you for standing up. You give me hope that there's still a place for justice in this world. Amara smiled faintly, though her eyes stung. She wasn't fighting for herself. She was fighting for children like that boy, for those who might be judged for nothing but their skin. Her phone rang. President Marshall was on the line. Amara, I just read the preliminary investigation report. They're recommending prosecution for Bradley on charges of abuse of authority and badge removal. But the final decision needs your approval. Amara was silent for a few seconds, then replied slowly. I don't want justice to become revenge, sir. I want him to understand that every person he's ever looked down on has a story, a value, and a pain of their own. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Amara, said the president. No, sir, she answered softly. I'm just a woman who's had to stand up too many times, even when I no longer had the strength. A few weeks later, the final hearing was held. Bradley was stripped of his badge. He left the police station in silence. No one saw him off. No one looked his way. Only the cold, early winter wind brushed against his shoulders. In his pocket was an unsent handwritten letter. Dear Director Amara Lewis, I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you know that you made me realize who I am, and that the people I once failed to understand deserve more respect than I ever gave. He knew some mistakes could never be erased, but at least he could begin again with truth. Months later, Amara received an invitation to the White House for an awards ceremony honoring her composure and dignity in adversity. When invited to speak, she said only one short sentence, but it brought the entire room to its feet in applause. Sometimes, justice isn't about punishment. It's about helping others see the humanity within themselves. The lights reflected on Amara's face, bright yet solemn. She hadn't won, nor lost. She had simply stood up with all the dignity of a human being. News of the Amara Lewis incident spread across America like wildfire sweeping through a dry field. But this fire no longer stopped at outrage. It became a collective fury. In New York, thousands flooded the streets, carrying banners that read "Justice for Amara" and "We can't breathe dignity." In Chicago, police were forced to block off the central square as protests stretched for hours. In Los Angeles, the dark night glowed with candlelight as citizens stood in silence, mourning all the nameless victims who had endured the same fate. Amara's story was no longer an isolated incident. It had become the symbol of an entire era. Inside the White House press room, tension hung thick as a wire. Dozens of journalists crowded together, microphones raised, voices buzzing over one another like a swarm of bees. Ms. Lewis, do you think you're becoming a political symbol for the anti-police brutality movement? Are you planning to join a national forum on law enforcement reform? There are rumors that some members of Congress are using your story to attack the administration. What's your response? Amara sat upright, calm in her gray suit, hands loosely clasped on the table. She looked straight into the camera, her voice low and steady. I don't represent any side. I represent those who have been treated unjustly and never had the chance to speak. I am not against the police. I am against abuse of power. Her words silenced the entire room. A CNN reporter nodded quietly, giving her a thumbs up. Behind them, a group of cameramen paused for a moment, as if to absorb the weight of her statement. At the same time, in a small suburban bar, Bradley Cooper sat alone in a dim corner. Worn jacket, hollow eyes. The TV on the wall played Amara's press conference. He watched the screen. The woman he had once humiliated was now addressing the entire nation. She didn't attack him. She didn't disparage the police. She spoke only of dignity, responsibility, and trust. Bradley drained his beer, eyes stinging. He realized it was perhaps the first time he had truly listened to Amara speak. At the White House, the waves of public reaction were giving President Marshall a headache. He sat in the Oval Office with his senior advisors. We have to do something, one advisor urged. If not, this movement will spiral out of control. Congress is divided, and the opposition is using Amara's story to attack law enforcement. The president rubbed his temples weary-eyed. I know, but we can't silence her. She's right. We have a systemic problem we can't keep covering up. But, sir, another advisor interrupted, there are reports that lobbying groups are approaching Amara. They want her to run for a Senate seat. If that happens, she won't just be the director of security anymore. The room fell into silence. Marshall turned toward the window, where the American flag fluttered fiercely in the autumn wind. I don't believe Amara seeks power. She seeks justice. But because of that, many will try to use her. And just as the president feared, the political storm began to rise. On social media, two factions clearly emerged. One hailed Amara as a hero of justice. The other condemned her as a destroyer of trust in the nation's protectors. Tweets, commentary videos, late-night talk shows, all revolved around her. The name Amara Lewis appeared on every headline, sometimes beside the word hope, sometimes threat. At her office, Amara began receiving strange letters. Some were thank you notes, but others arrived in unmarked envelopes, containing only a sheet of paper with a scrawled message. Stay silent if you want to stay alive. She told no one. As a security expert, she could tell the difference between real threats and intimidation. But deep down, she knew someone had begun to fear her influence. Late one rainy night, Amara left the White House after a security briefing. The lights along Pennsylvania Avenue gleamed on the wet asphalt. As she approached the parking lot, A black SUV stopped in front of her. The window lowered. A middle-aged man in a gray suit looked at her, his gaze calculating. "Director Lewis," he said, "I'm Senator Graham. I think we should talk." Amara stood still, expression unchanged. "If you want to talk politics, I'm not interested." "I'm not talking politics." Graham lowered his voice. "I'm talking about your safety." Amara frowned slightly. "You're touching too many people's interests," he continued. "And there are those who don't want to see a strong black woman on national television. I can protect you if you agree to cooperate." "Cooperate means silence?" Amara asked, her tone icy. Graham shrugged. "Call it what you want. But in this town, people who talk too much tend to disappear." She looked straight into his eyes, the rain light glimmering in her dark gaze. "Then I'll keep talking until no one can silence me again." With that, Amara walked away, leaving the senator standing in the rain, his face hardening in the dim light. The next morning, headlines exploded. White House Security Director Amara Lewis receives death threats. The news poured fuel on the fire. Thousands gathered in front of the White House, holding signs that read, "Protect Amara." Protests spread even to small towns, where people had long endured the quiet injustice of the system. On the Freedom Plaza stage, Amara stepped out before a sea of people. The wind lifted her jacket. Drizzle speckled her shoulders, but she didn't step away from the microphone. "I don't want to be celebrated. I want every person to be respected. I don't want protection. I want fairness. And I won't be silent, because silence is complicity." Cheers erupted, swelling into a rhythmic chant. "Justice! Justice! Justice!" The image spread worldwide. A black woman standing in the rain, speaking of dignity as if speaking of breath itself. But while the public burned with passion, a darker plot was quietly taking shape in the shadows. In a secret office on the outskirts of Virginia, 3 men in suits examined Amara's personal file. One of them, wearing glasses, spoke coldly. "She's being idolized by the public. If we don't contain her, she'll become a political threat." "So what do we do?" the second man asked. "Discredit her," the first replied sharply. "Find something in her past. Everyone has a secret." On the table, a screen displayed an old photograph. Amara in military uniform, standing beside an unknown man. The image was grainy but intimate. The man with glasses smiled thinly. "There it is, exactly what we need." That evening, as Amara reviewed new security files, her assistant Angela rushed in. "Ms. Lewis, you need to see this." Angela handed her an iPad. On the homepage of a major online paper blazed the headline. "Shocking scandal. White House Security Director once had secret relationship with a traitorous officer." Amara's chest tightened. The photo had been cleverly doctored. The man beside her was Eli Carter, a fallen comrade who had died during a mission in Syria. Her hands clenched, eyes flashing with pain and fury. "They're trying to assassinate my honor." Angela's voice trembled. "Do you want me to contact the press for a rebuttal?" Amara shook her head. "No. The more I defend, the more they win. I'll strike back with the truth." That night, Amara went to Arlington Cemetery, where Eli was buried. She stood silently before his grave, the light rain seeping into her coat. "They want to turn our memory into shame, Eli," she whispered. "But I swear I won't let them." From afar, headlights flickered. A shadow stood beneath a tree. Watching her, Bradley Cooper. He had been following her story since the incident. Bradley stepped closer and said softly, "I heard about it. I figured you'd be here." Amara turned, her gaze calm but firm. "You came to say what, Officer Cooper?" "To say, I believe you," he answered sincerely. "And if you need someone to help expose the truth, I owe you that." A long silence passed. Then, for the first time since everything began, Amara nodded faintly. "Good. Because this time, we're not fighting for color. We're fighting for the truth." America's anger had just begun, but behind it loomed a new war. A war between justice and power, between truth and those who manipulate it from the shadows. The morning in Washington carried an unusual chill. It wasn't raining, but long gray clouds stretched across the sky, wrapping the city in a thin mist. Amara sat in the back of a black SUV belonging to the Secret Service, her eyes fixed on the fogged window pane. On the radio, the host was still talking about her, voice laced with both sympathy and curiosity. White House Security Director, Mrs. Amara Lewis, has not appeared before the press since her closed-door meeting with the Justice Department yesterday. Public opinion remains divided. Is this a case of police misconduct or a political scheme to undermine her credibility? She quietly switched the radio off. A brief silence followed, broken only by the steady hum of the engine. The driver, Agent Malik, her trusted subordinate, glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Director, we're almost there. The president wants to meet privately, just the two of you." Amara nodded slightly. She drew a deep breath, as if preparing to walk into an interrogation rather than a private meeting. The Oval Office was bright with sunlight, but the atmosphere was heavy. President Harris stood by the window, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched from fatigue. When Amara entered, he only turned his head slightly. "Thank you for coming. Sit down, Amara." She sat, posture straight. "I'm guessing this is about Reynolds." Harris sighed, eyes resting on a thick file on the desk. "You guessed right. But it's not just about Reynolds. There's more to it." He pushed the stack toward her. Amara opened it. Inside were transcripts, internal emails, and traffic camera photos from the morning she was arrested. One detail made her blood run cold. At least 3 different cameras had captured the scene, and all were accessed by a high-level police account only 10 minutes after the incident. "Someone knew in advance?" she murmured. Harris nodded. "It appears so. And whoever it was didn't just want to humiliate you. They wanted to pressure the entire White House. You understand, Amara? Your case is being exploited, weaponized." She sat still, but her chest tightened. From the start, she had sensed this was more than racial prejudice. But she hadn't expected to be used by the very system she'd spent her life defending. "What do you want me to do?" Amara asked, voice even and cold. "I want you to stay away from this. Let's handle the politics. You're too valuable, Amara. I don't want to see you dragged down." She gave a short, dry laugh. "With all due respect, Mr. President, I can't stand by while they turn me into a pawn. You're letting emotions drive you." "No, sir. I'm being a cop." The room fell silent. Harris studied her for a long moment, then nodded faintly. "Then be careful. They don't play by the rules." That afternoon, Amara returned to the National Security Office. As soon as she opened the door, Malik was waiting with another folder. "I found this," he said. "Internal financial reports from the D.C. Police Department. Some entries don't add up. Part of the Operational Support Fund was redirected to an organization called Patriot Shield Alliance." The name made Amara frown. She had heard it before, a private group allegedly funding police units and veterans, yet linked to numerous racially motivated incidents. "Can you trace who's behind it?" "Not yet, but it looks like they're protected by a few members of the National Security Committee." Amara leaned back, her heart sinking. The pieces began to align. A seemingly random, mistaken arrest. In fact, a calculated political move aimed directly at her. The first black woman ever to serve as White House Security Director. "If I'm the target," she said quietly, "then they've been planning this for a long time. Reynolds was just a pawn." Malik nodded. "I had someone tail him. He's meeting with a private lawyer funded by a group with the same name, Patriot Shield." Amara pressed her lips together. "Good. From now on, we investigate ourselves quietly." Night. Her apartment no longer felt like a sanctuary. Dozens of files covered the table. Reports, email copies, surveillance stills, contact lists. All of it formed a web connecting political power to police corruption. She read through a report noting that Reynolds had been temporarily reassigned away from the 7th Street District 2 days before the incident, then called back that same morning. Not a coincidence. Impossible. The phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Director Lewis?" A hoarse male voice, distorted as if through a scrambler. "Who is this?" "Someone in the department." "You don't know me, but I know what you're digging into. You're touching what they don't want you to see." "And who exactly are they?" "The ones behind Patriot Shield. If you want to live, walk away now." Then, the line went dead. Amara clenched the phone in her hand. She'd been threatened before, But this time was different. The man's voice carried genuine fear. The next morning, Amara went to see Reynolds. He was suspended, living in a small apartment on the outskirts. When the door opened, she found a man completely unlike the arrogant officer from before. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, defeated. "You here to humiliate me some more?" Reynolds rasped. Amara looked at him for a long moment, then placed a photo on the table. An image of him receiving an envelope from a man in a black suit outside Patriot Shield headquarters. "You know this man?" Reynolds went pale. I don't know who he is. They just told me to check a suspicious individual. And you did that in the middle of the street, in front of dozens of witnesses, with no warrant? They said it was clear by a superior. I thought it was a legitimate order. Amara studied his eyes. She saw fear, not of being caught, but of realizing he'd been used. "Reynolds, if you want to save yourself, tell me everything." He was silent for a while, then exhaled shakily. "I got a call from a security advisor. He said I'd get promoted if I did one thing. Stop a suspicious woman on 7th Street. I had no idea it was you." Amara froze. Security advisor, a term reserved for federal units. That meant someone high up was involved. Name? I don't know. Male voice, maybe around 50, called from an internal line. Amara stood, her eyes hard as steel. "Thank you, Reynolds. I'll find him." That afternoon, she returned to headquarters. Malik rushed over, holding a sealed file. "Director," he wasn't lying. "I traced the call to Reynolds. It came from the Department of Homeland Security." Amara stopped dead. Her pulse turned cold. "Homeland Security?" "Yes." And the caller's name was Ethan Cole, Deputy Director of Domestic Intelligence. The name sent a chill down her spine. Ethan had once been her direct superior for years earlier. They had worked together on multiple missions, until a budget dispute cost him his position and elevated her. Since then, an unspoken resentment had simmered between them. Amara's hands curled into fists. "Now I understand. This isn't politics. It's revenge." Malik's face tensed. "What do? We hit his network, quietly. I need evidence." She turned, eyes burning with resolve. "If he used the nation's badge to disgrace me, I'll use justice to bring him down." That night, as rain blanketed the city, Amara sat before her laptop, logging into the federal security database. She began downloading archived files, emails, meeting records, Patriot Shield's funding lists. Each document confirmed the same grim truth. A network of power stretching from Congress to Homeland Security was manipulating national security policy for personal gain. In the dark, the screen reflected her face, weary but alight with determination. She knew she was entering the most dangerous battle of her life. No bullets, no visible enemy. Only a war against the shadow within the system itself. Amara whispered, "They want me silent, but I'll make the whole country listen." In the small apartment in Adams Morgan, the glow from the laptop reflected across Amara's face, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, yet burning with fire. The files she and Malik had collected over the past 48 hours now filled the hard drive. Dozens of encrypted emails, secret funding lists for Patriot Shield, and, most damning of all, a sequence of internal orders from the Department of Homeland Security bearing Ethan Cole's signature. Cold lines of text appeared on the screen. Target confirmed, A. Lewis. Apply public pressure. Activate Operation 7S. Amara's hand trembled slightly. Every suspicion she'd held was now undeniable truth. She was no longer being targeted because she was black or because of her position, but because she had dared to expose what they were hiding. She murmured to herself, "Operation 7S, Street 7. They named it after the very place they humiliated me." Malik, sitting nearby, struggled to keep calm. "Director, we have proof. If we send this to the press, the whole thing will explode." Amara shook her head. "No, not yet. If we release it now, they'll say I fabricated the data. I need legal evidence, something they can't deny. But if you wait, they'll find us." "I know," she cut in, voice steady. "That's why I have to move before they do." She closed the laptop and stood. Outside the window, the sky was still black velvet, But inside Amara, a light had begun to rise, the light of retaliation. The next morning, the Department of Homeland Security buzzed as usual. Rapid footsteps, elevator doors opening and closing, men in suits whispering and passing. No one noticed the brown-skinned woman walking calmly through security, her badge clipped neatly to her jacket. Her name, Amara Lewis, White House Security Director. She had clearance to go anywhere. But today, she wasn't here for a meeting. She was here to confront. The doors of the 23rd floor slid open. Ethan Cole's office, at the end of the hallway, stood slightly ajar. She entered without knocking. Ethan stood with his back to her, gazing out the window, voice low. "I figured you'd come. I'm not the kind of person who runs," Amara replied, her tone sharp as glass. Ethan turned, deep wrinkles carved across his face, his eyes gleaming with mockery. "You're always the same, Amara. Stubborn, self-righteous, believing justice will prevail. But in Washington, justice is just another card on the political table." Amara stepped closer. "You used the federal system to humiliate me, to turn me into a symbol of division." "Why, Ethan?" He shrugged slightly. "Because you're too clean, too hard to control, and because you had the nerve to expose the dirty security contracts everyone else ignored. You cost powerful people a lot of money, Amara. I simply restored balance to the game." She stared directly at him, unflinching. "You think you've won? You haven't. I have the evidence." Ethan smirked, cold and amused. "I know, and I also know where you're keeping it." He turned toward his desk and pressed the intercom button. "Security team, room 23. Unauthorized personnel." Amara didn't move. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Ethan." He arched an eyebrow. "And you're standing in my building." The door burst open. 2 security officers entered, hands on their guns. But Amara was ready. She held up an official document, straight from the White House, signed by the president. "I'm here to audit internal security operations at the president's request. And if any of you obstruct me, you'll answer directly to him." The guards hesitated, glancing at each other. Ethan clenched his jaw. He knew she wasn't bluffing. Her authority was absolute. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "Very well, Amara. You've won this round. But the game isn't over." Amara replied coldly. "I don't play games. I investigate." That afternoon, she and Malik returned to the car. "We can extract his internal data within 24 hours, Malik said. "But I'm worried he'll wipe everything." "It's fine," Amara replied. "I have a way." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small silver drive, a copy of the data she'd already downloaded from Ethan's system the previous night, using special access she still held from her time in the department. "He can erase the system, but he can't erase this." Malik smiled faintly. "I knew you wouldn't leave empty-handed." They drove in silence. The city outside gleamed with lights, but anxiety still lingered between them. Amara knew she had just declared war, not against a man, but against a monster without a face, a shadow that slithered through every level of power. That night, Amara returned home. As she stepped inside, the living room lights flicked on. A man sat in the chair, tall, his face half hidden in the dark. She instantly drew her gun. "Who's there?" "Calm down, Amara. It's me." The voice was familiar, President Harris. She lowered the gun, startled. "Sir, what are you doing here?" "I can't go to the White House. Too many eyes. I needed to speak privately." He stepped closer, voice quiet but firm. "I know you're going too far, but I also know you're right. Ethan Cole isn't just settling a personal score. He's part of a network manipulating the security budget. I want you to keep going, but be extremely careful." Amara looked at him, surprised. "You believe me?" "Not just believe. I need you." "But Amara, once you open this door, there's no going back." She paused for a few seconds, then said softly, "Already stepped through, sir, and I don't intend to turn back." The next morning, Malik received a security alert. The federal system was tracking unauthorized access, Amara's account. "They found us," he shouted over the phone. "It's fine," Amara replied calmly. "We moved to Plan B." Plan B, controlled disclosure. They sent the encrypted data to an anonymous investigative journalist. someone Amara had once saved during a terrorist attack years ago. Within hours, a flood of headlines appeared. Shadow Power Network inside Homeland Security, funding the extremist group Patriot Shield. The hidden internal investigation, who really orchestrated Operation 7S. Ethan Cole's name appeared in every headline. Washington trembled. Congress demanded an emergency hearing. News channels aired live footage of federal agents storming Homeland Security headquarters, seizing servers. Amara sat in the conference room, silently watching the TV. Malik stood beside her, voice shaking. "You did it." But Amara didn't smile. "Not yet. This is only the beginning." By late afternoon, Ethan was taken into custody. As he was escorted to the vehicle, he turned, eyes still sharp, unafraid. "You think you've won, Amara? You've only touched the surface. The real shadow goes deeper than you can imagine." Amara answered quietly, but the words made him freeze. "I'm not afraid of the dark. I was born in it." That night, Amara stood by her window, gazing at the golden dots of light scattered across the city. Below, Washington moved as always, the buildings, the cars, the people, unaware of the silent war raging at its core. She closed her eyes, letting the cold wind sweep through her hair. Inside, she knew this was only the prelude. The others, those above Ethan, the friends in Congress, the corporations behind Patriot Shield, were still out there, hidden. Amara smiled faintly, her eyes gleaming like steel. "If they want a war, I'll bring the light straight into their lair." The autumn rain poured down over Washington, blurring the line between day and night. The government building where Amara worked was still glowing with lights, though it was nearly midnight. In the meeting room on the 11th floor, only she and a few trusted associates remained, those willing to stay until the end of a battle whose victor no one could yet foresee. On the large screen, a series of documents were projected: audio recordings, covert contracts, and leaked emails from the servers of Orion Corporation, the tech giant behind the entire police surveillance camera network. The name Project Shield appeared with a chilling note: special collaboration with the Department of Homeland Security, classified national security. Amara crossed her arms, eyes deep in calm. "We've gone too far to turn back," she said softly. Deputy Security Director Ethan replied, "If you expose this, they'll call it treason. Orion has contracts with the Pentagon. You know the consequences, don't you?" Amara nodded slightly, her tone low but unwavering. "I know, but if we stay silent, there will never be real justice. We can't protect America with rotten secrets." The next day, an emergency meeting was held in the Oval Office. The president, the national security advisor, and several high-ranking officials were present. Amara presented her findings. Orion had manipulated biased recognition algorithms that racially profiled people within the police surveillance system, resulting in thousands of wrongful arrests across the country. Their goal: to manipulate data, create fear, and pave the way for a global security program under their control. The room fell silent, heavy with tension. The president, an aging white man with silver hair, looked at Amara for a long moment. "You're saying a private tech corporation has manipulated our entire national security apparatus?" "Not just manipulated, sir," Amara replied. "They've created a nightmare, one that's been legalized by the very regulations we signed." Another advisor interjected. "Do you have concrete proof? Or just speculation?" Amara held up a USB drive. "Inside this is internal data my team retrieved from Orion's backup server. If I'm wrong, you can arrest me right here." The room froze. The president signaled to a technical aide to verify it. Minutes later, the aide returned, face pale. "The data is real. Everything matches perfectly." No one spoke. The president stood and walked to the window, looking out toward the south lawn of the White House. "You know, Amara," he said slowly, "sometimes justice and power don't walk the same path. Are you sure this is the road you want to take?" Amara met his gaze, unblinking. "I'm not fighting for myself, sir. I'm fighting for those like me. The ones who've been misunderstood, beaten down, yet still believe in America." The president was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Then let justice speak, even if it hurts us. 2 days later, the news exploded across every media outlet. Major newspapers ran the headline: White House Security Director accuses Orion Corporation of manipulating police data. The stock market plummeted, Congress called an emergency hearing, and Orion shares dropped 47% in one morning. At Orion headquarters, CEO Mason Cray hurled a crystal glass to the floor. That woman wants to drag the whole world down with her. His assistant stammered, "Sir, the federal prosecutor has issued a warrant to search the offices. Shut everyone up. I won't let some woman destroy this empire." Mason ordered all original data deleted, but it was too late. The entire system had already been copied by Amara's technical team 3 days earlier, authenticated by international encryption codes. That night, Amara sat alone in her office. Outside, the city shimmered with 1,000 lights, but inside her, there was only quiet. Ethan entered, placing an early printed newspaper on her desk. The headline read, "Public hails Black female director for exposing the shadow of power." He said softly, "You did it, Amara." She gave a faint smile. "Did it? No. We've only begun to restore the truth. Real justice will take a generation." Weeks later, the congressional hearing took place. Amara entered the grand chamber, dozens of cameras aimed directly at her. Outside, citizens held banners reading, "We stand with Amara." A senator grilled her sharply. "Do you realize your actions caused billions in losses and jeopardized national security?" Amara answered calmly, "If national security depends on lies and prejudice, then it's no longer the America I swore to protect." The hall went silent. Moments later, applause erupted, first scattered, then rising to fill the room. Amara bowed her head, a silent tear falling. A month later, the Orion project was suspended and multiple senior officials were placed under investigation. The president signed an executive order to reform the entire national surveillance system. An independent commission was founded, named the Open Justice Commission, led directly by Amara. That evening, she returned to 7th Street, where it had all begun. The rain had stopped, water glistening beneath the streetlights. The old cafe was still open. The barista recognized her, but said nothing, only smiled and made her a hot coffee, just like that first day. She sat at her old seat, watching people pass by. A group of schoolchildren walked past. The youngest looked at her and said softly, "You're the lady from TV, right? My mom says you're brave." Amara smiled and asked, "What do you think bravery is?" The boy thought for a moment, then replied, "It's doing what's right, even when people say it's wrong." She nodded gently, eyes softening. "You're absolutely right." A light breeze drifted through, carrying the scent of coffee through the air. Amara gazed toward the White House, glowing bright in the night, symbol of both power and duty. She knew her fight wasn't over, but at least she had proven one truth. Justice doesn't need to be loud to exist. It only needs those willing to walk through darkness for tomorrow's light. She rose, slipped on her coat, and walked down the quiet street. The lamplight reflected her shadow across the wet pavement. And as she crossed the same intersection where she'd once been humiliated, she paused for a moment. In the faint echo of memory, the shouts and shoves seemed to fade away. Now, there was only Amara Lewis, the woman who turned pain into power, disgrace into purpose, and taught a nation that true justice knows no color or rank. Above her, the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds. A new chapter for America began, with the silhouette of a woman walking quietly forward, carrying in her heart one unshakable belief. No one can stop justice when it is written in truth and courage.